Hi, this is going to be lesson 18. I wanted to give an example of how the primary person's beliefs will always have a point of intersection with the alters or the alternate personalities that are usually stored in the back of the brain. So the primary person is going to be the one who operates life. And you can have more than one primary part, but there's always going to be a place where the beliefs of the primary person will echo the beliefs of the trauma related alters that are behind the scenes doing life. That doesn't mean that they don't come forward, because they will, especially if they're protectors. They'll be pulled forward to protect when there's overwhelm with the primary person. So there will be alters that they're just trapped in trauma and they won't come forward and live life. And you have to actually work to be able to free them from the belief that they're currently in that trauma. They're frozen in time in that trauma. And then there's going to be alters who will have certain jobs to carry out. Some are for programming, and some are just internal jobs that they take on. They can be helpers, and protectors are going to be helpers even if they are cult loyal. Protectors are always there to protect. The belief systems they have are going to be different than the primary person, but their motivation will be to protect, even if they're making decisions that feel contrary to the safety of the primary part. Their bottom line is trying to keep that person alive. And the way they do that can be ingrained in childhood and may no longer be valid, but they don't know it. They're focused and they're running according to programming, and they don't really have connection to the outside world as much as the primary person does. So there's all different levels of alters and parts and jobs that they have and beliefs that they carry. And even if they have polar opposite beliefs, like one loves Jesus and one worships Lucifer, even though they have polar opposite belief systems, there will be a point where the emotions line up. And that's the point that you're looking for in the session. Now, a lot of times I'll ask people to do some right brain work before the session so that they will come prepared to dive into whatever's stored in trauma. But there are times where their lives just don't allow that kind of introspection, just depending on what's going on in their daily life. So when people come and they don't have a trauma that they know of that they need to deal with, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, well, what have you been processing lately? Because it's interesting. When you're on the healing journey, your brain will start processing emotions of things down deep, even though they feel like emotions that are related to your current life. What your brain is doing is it's pulling up from down deep that next layer that's ready to be processed. And so in this session, I asked the lady what she had been processing, and she said that she'd been processing that her childhood was full of abusive, violent, dominating men. She grew up in a broken home, and her mom consistently chose psychotic, dangerous men to bring into the home. But she was realizing that her experience with Christian men was mimicking that in some ways. There was a perversion and an abuse and a domination that was being shown. And she was kind of grieving the lack of a father figure that was pure hearted in her life. She just hadn't met anybody that filled that role. So she was realizing that there's something in that dynamic that really causes her to shrink and become small. And she doesn't live a small life. She's very strong spiritually and knows her authority in Christ. And it's not normal for her to be small and quiet. And so she was realizing that around unhealthy authority is where that would surface. So we were talking through like the healing that she had gotten so far. Like she's gotten a lot of deliverance and healing on the journey. And she had worked through her beliefs about God and who he was. And she had developed a very close relationship with him as daddy. She didn't have a father figure in her life that fit the role, that was nurturing, supportive, comforting, protecting. And so that was a whole new experience for her. So she'd worked through a lot of the counterfeits of Jesus, of the Holy Spirit, and of God. And she'd worked through the differences, and she'd gotten rooted in her relationship with the Lord. But the men that she was introduced to in her life, both in her childhood and her adult life, led her to the belief that she can't trust men to lead, protect, or to be authority because she'll get hurt. And she was even married at one time, and her ex-husband had spoken over her that you hate authority. And we had to talk a little bit about that because it's not that she hates all authority. It's that she hates abuse and she doesn't want a misuse of power in authority. And so we were peeling away words that were spoken over her and false beliefs that were implanted, and just recognizing that there was a lot of injustice in the authority that she had been under her entire life. And so I knew that we weren't necessarily to the core belief yet. And so I asked her, what does it mean if you can't trust men to lead or protect or be authority? And then she said, well, then I'm alone and I'm unsafe. And I said, okay, so who is God if you're alone and unsafe? And she knew that her adult self would say that he's daddy, he's the one she can go to and spend time with him. He's Abba. But her child self could not even picture God. She didn't know God when she was little. So I asked her to, as the adult, ask the Lord, how does he see the perverse, unhealthy men? And she said he sees them as broken, detached from him emotionally, and they don't know what they're doing. So then we had enough foundation and truth for her adult self so that we could go to the child self to find out where did this belief get planted. And as soon as we started praying over that, she realized that she'd actually been processing a memory this week that had come up, but she forgot she had that come up. And it was so real, but so terrible, she thought surely she must be making this up. So her mom, who had brought a lot of psychotic men into her life, was dating a guy that was very violent, and he ended up putting her in the trunk of a car and driving around. And she was very scared and very confused. And concerned for her life. And so I asked her, from that place, what did she believe about herself? And she said, I was born into the wrong family. And I asked her, what did you believe about God? And she said, He didn't exist. And when we explored that memory, what she remembered was the man had threatened her mom. If the mom ever left him or separated from him, he would set her, the child, on fire and kill her. And she knew he would do it. And the terror of that was so all-consuming, because not even the mom could get away. When the mom can't get away, what hope does the child have? So they ended up in a women's shelter for a while, and they had to hide. It was kind of like below ground. There were windows at foot level, but she couldn't even get close to the window because her mom wanted her to stay away and not be seen. That's how dangerous this guy was. And so I asked her, okay, if this is true, if this memory is true, what does it make the little girl believe? And it was really hard to verbalize this belief because it had so much pain, and she didn't want it to be true, but it felt so true in the moment. And she said what she believed is that she's a slave and she is always trapped, that she's going to be going from situation to situation where she's just always going to be the slave and always trapped. And even when she was trying to leave her abusive husband, what she recognized is the ex-husband was playing the role of master, and she was still the slave. And when she tried to leave him, he was very abusive to her. Her childhood made her believe that she was a slave born into a family of slaves. And that trunk experience had her so shocked and so scared. She'd had no counseling, nothing, no way to process it. She was afraid to talk about it, afraid to feel it. And in that moment, she had to split. And so I asked her, okay, what color does it feel like you split into, to try and give it an idea of what kind of split we were dealing with. And she said red and black. And I said, who did red and black have to become? And she said they had to become independent. They had to become their own parent. And they had to hold on to anger and rage as a form of self-protection. And everything in her life was turned to blame her for the outcome of things that were way beyond her control, from when she was little to when she was leaving the ex-husband. And the words that people were using were the same. It was, look what you have done. This is all your fault. And we asked Jesus to show her where he was when she was in that trunk. And she had a hard time believing that Jesus was with her in that, because she didn't even know God. But so then we asked Jesus to show himself to the red and black. And he came on the scene, and she said it kind of looked like hinds feet in high places, with much afraid, and who Jesus was in that scene. And Jesus came on the scene, and he told them they're safe to experience play and joy, because she was younger than 8 in this experience. And from inside she heard, but I am anger and I am rage. And so we had to talk about the difference between feeling an emotion and being that emotion, and between using that power source to protect yourself and who you actually are. And so when we were praying a disconnection from the emotions of being trapped, of being a slave, of having people that were in authority that were improper, perverse, and dominating. We prayed a disconnection from all masters and from improper authority. We prayed a disconnection from the spirits and the internal and external sources of anger and rage. And immediately they were able to hug Jesus, and they knew that they were his children and they belong. And Jesus was able to convey to them that when he died on the cross, he died once, and he took everything that she had experienced on himself. So even though she wasn't aware of him when she was locked in that trunk, he was there carrying that burden for her, and he chose to die so that he could redeem this for her. And so we took that truth from the childhood memory, and then we brought it through to the adult memory of when she was trying to leave her ex-husband. He had trapped her in the house. She didn't have a phone, didn't have a way to call for help, and he was yelling and very angry and abusive, and telling her children, "Look what your mom has done." So some of that same language of blame from throughout her childhood and all the domination that had happened there. And so we asked Jesus to show her where he was in this time. And this one was a whole lot easier for her to tap into because she was a Christian by this point and living for him. And Jesus said he was preparing an exodus. He was preparing a way out for her. And she knew that it was a miracle that she would leave, because the lesson that she had learned from her mother and from other women in her childhood was, when you're abused, you stay so that you can stay alive, because leaving means death. And in order for her to have the strength to leave the ex-husband, Jesus had to have been preparing her heart and preparing a way. Because the world, through abuse, had given her the message that you stay to stay alive. But religious messages in her abusive marriage had given her the message that you stay to honor God. And she fought for that marriage, and she fasted and prayed and submitted and did everything that she knew to do to turn that marriage around. And yet he was having affairs and blaming her. He said, "You're too holy, you're too righteous," so he was wanting to blame her for his infidelity. So Jesus showed her that in that moment when she was trying to leave him, that he was actually sheltering the children from what was being done, that he was helping it not injure them deeply, and that he was showing them the difference between himself and their physical dad. And he actually needed them to see that kind of behavior so that they wouldn't believe the lie and blame her for the broken home. They needed to see that it was actually the dad's domination and abuse that was causing the split in the home. So we talked about the identity from her childhood was you're a slave and you will always struggle, and how that still felt true even in her adult life, that even though she had separated from the abusive marriage and abusive pastors, she still felt like she was in that system where she would always struggle. So we asked Jesus about that belief, and he said that he came to set the captives free. She was not designed to be a slave. That yes, you will wrestle, but it's against principalities and powers and you've been given all authority. I think we sometimes as Christians, we think if there's struggle, then we must be doing something wrong. And I think it's a very shallow gospel that tells us that there's a blessed life and we can avoid the strife in this world completely. Yes, there's blessing in this life, but in this world we will have trouble. Those were the words of Jesus. But we can take heart because he's overcome the world. So we can't always see signs of struggle as a sign of there's disobedience in our life or we're doing something wrong. We have to understand that we will wrestle, and it is hand-to-hand combat. It's close combat in this world. Okay, so we ended it up by just acknowledging the absolute chaos of her childhood, escaping one abusive man to the next, and constantly seeing abuse. I mean, family members the women were thrown out of windows, just seeing horrible abuse all around. It started this mechanism of chaos of I am unsafe and I live in a dangerous world. And instead, we brought it around to I have been redeemed, I have been preserved, and I am coming out of the mindset of slavery and into relationship and friendship with Jesus. We ended with her life is not a chaotic journey to escape slavery, but there will be peace and she can be rooted in any given moment. Just like Jesus had peace in the boat, even though the storm was there, she can have peace in any given moment, even if there's chaotic things happening around her. It's not her fault. She's not being punished. She doesn't have to shrink and be small. And she doesn't have to become a slave to the dominant force in her environment. She's rooted and grounded in Jesus. And he is with her, strengthening her, protecting her. He is the force that she can connect to and have shalom.